Hey guys, we've got this 2013 Matrix here with an exhaust leak. It's in one of the more common areas on this vehicle, and I'll show you once we get it up in the air, but I'm gonna be removing the exhaust so we can fix it, and we have to do something inside the car first before we lift it up, and that is disconnect the oxygen sensor. Now, you can either unthread it out of the exhaust, but I like to just leave it in there and actually unplug it, so I'll show you right now. If you look through here, you can see down by the gas pedal there is that black wire, and that's where the oxygen sensor comes up through the floor and then to a gray connector. Now there's a cover, this is the cover here that you'll have to remove, and it's just got some attention tab here. All you do is just pull it off and slide it out this way. And then, I know I can't really show you, but there's a locking tab on this connector that's located on the bottom, and you'll just push it up and it unplugs. Pretty simple there. Once you get that unplugged, you can sort of pull the carpet back a little bit and fish that thing down through the hole that it comes out of. And it's sort of just like where your feet would sit when you're driving. So once that's pushed through the floor, we're ready to go up in the air, or if you're doing this at home and don't have a hoist, crawl underneath. All right, these are the parts that you're gonna need. We got the donut gasket here, and that gasket lists for $44.44. If you know somebody that'll hook you up, $37.77. It's probably this price online. The springs themselves, I got new ones because they get rusty. Might as well change them, right? A0005. $11.95 each, and $10.16. And then the bolts themselves, they're a little different than a regular bolt. As you can see, these are what go bad. The actual head of them rots off, and then the spring lets go, and they lose their tension, and that's when the flange comes apart. And I'll show you that once we get it up in the air. But those bolts should be $5.17 each. You need two of them, or $4.39 if you know somebody. Anyhow, that's what you're gonna need. Also, I do recommend to use some high temperature silicone. I'm gonna use this as like a gasket seal or a gasket maker, and I'll show you the reason why once we get the pipe off. Mostly just because of rust and wear and tear on the pipe, the cone flange that donut seals against. And I'll explain more when we get it off. So I'm gonna get this thing up in the air and we'll start taking it apart. All right, so this is the flange that I'm talking about. This comes right off the engine from the exhaust manifold to the mid pipe that has your two catalytic converters and the resonator, which is the bigger one in the center. Here's the oxygen sensor that we just unplugged. So we're just gonna pull that through and make sure the connector doesn't get caught up on anything. Now we just have a clip here, so I'm gonna use a trim tool and just pop that off. You can see the two bolts, they're 14 millimeter heads with the springs behind them. And then if you come take a look through this way, you can see the flange up in there with the very, very rusty nut that is part of the manifold. That nut is welded on there from the factory. And what happens is they rot away, and then eventually they fall apart, and the spring bolt will just fly off and it loses tension and the exhaust starts to come apart. So we're gonna be removing and replacing the bolt, the spring, and the gasket like we've seen. And also, we'll probably have to knock off the welded nuts and get some nuts and stick them up in there and thread them on because those just won't do. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this job. When we're gonna take this apart, you can completely remove this pipe, or we can try to just lower the exhaust down. We'll unbolt it and just lower it down and see if we can just kind of move it. And the reason for that is because of this flange back here. These are usually the first flange to go on this vehicle, but same kind of deal. We got a donut gasket in there, spring bolts, and you can see the gasket itself is very, very crusty and hard and degraded, but it's not leaking yet. So if we go ahead and take that apart, you're gonna need the gasket and probably change the springs and bolts as well because they just don't survive. So what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna stick the jack back here to hold the muffler, and I'm going to use a ratchet strap across here, and I'm just going to undo the hardware up front and then take our mounts. There's 2 here at the resonator, and there's 1 right here, and then 2 more at the back for the muffler. So if I take all of those off, I should be able to sort of move the exhaust back far enough that I can then drop it down to access it without having to take this flange apart. The whole idea of that, obviously, we just don't want to have to replace any more parts than we have to. So saving the customer as much money as I can in this case. So first thing we got to do is get some sockets, 14 mil long extension, and I'm going to use my impact gun, but if you don't have one, you could just use a ratchet or something like that. We're going to get those bolts out. The hangers are holding the exhaust up right now, so don't worry about having to hold anything. It's not going to fall down once we take the bolts out. So I'm going to get some tools. Let's get to it. All right, so they've rusted away so much. That one, I may need to change the size of the socket. That one did come out, however. Now just watch, obviously exhaust is gonna be hot if you've run your vehicle. We can see the condition of these starting to rust away pretty decent. And also the threads too, they get damaged. So, I mean, in a dire case where you have to reuse it, you probably could. The springs usually don't rust and break. I think they're made from stainless, but we're just gonna change it anyways. So I'm going to, as far as the other one, I'm gonna try to switch to a 9/16, which is pretty close to 14 mil, and see if we can't get that thing off. Nope. We'll step it down to a 13 and see if that works. All right, we got that one off. It actually snapped. So you can see also too, the center gets very thin. That's another thing that happens. They get thin and snap off. So not a big deal. We'll, like I say, you can see the nut on the back side of that flange that's on the manifold, how rusty it is. That's actually going to help us get that out, because you can usually use like a hammer and a really sharp punch, and we can like cut it off, or use a little grinder if you can get in there, or an air hammer. That's what I'm going to use. The air hammer works really good. So now that we've got these bolts out, this thing, you'll notice it's loose, and we need to get this thing back so that we can access that and get the gasket off and clean it all up. So now I'm going to throw a ratchet strap across here, and I'll get the jack set up so that we can get this thing moved out of here. All right, I've got these pliers. They're specifically for exhaust hangers. So we're going to take that off and go back here and take these ones off as well. You can see I've got the jack there. All right, so we got this off. Now, you're not able to get it back far enough where you can actually drop the exhaust down, but it's enough where we can get in there and work now. So you can see the gasket. It's kind of crappy. We're gonna use just a flathead screwdriver or a pry bar or something and get that off. Luckily, the pipe itself that the gasket slides over is still in pretty clean condition. And then if you take a look at the cat, this is another problem with these. You can see the little holes that are underneath of that shield. And what'll happen is, oops, I don't know if that helps you or not, but yeah, right beside the weld, as it rusts, it gets thin, develops holes, and then as you're running the vehicle, it has exhaust leak going through those holes, right? And as exhaust comes out, oxygen's getting in. So 2 things happen. One, it superheats the catalyst, and if you leave it for long enough, it can melt the cat and give you a P0420 code, which is catalyst efficiency below threshold, meaning the cat's toast and you have to replace it, which can be expensive. And also too, the oxygen sensor will pick that up, and that can set fault codes, mess with your fuel trims a little bit, and just, yeah, cause sort of poor performance. So we definitely need to fix that as well. I've fixed a bunch of these. Unfortunately, you will need to know how to weld, and if you have to bring it to a shop to weld it, then you pretty much have to take that flange apart back there, pull this pipe out, take it to where you need it, get your buddy to weld it up, whatever. And I know the metal's really thin. You can see how rusty it is, but believe it or not, clean it up and have a welder turned on low. You can actually make up some patch plates out of mild steel and weld it all in and fix the leak. I've done it to many of these things. The repair lasts for a long time. So I'm going to do that last. First thing I'm ready to do here, I got to get that gasket off, and then I'm going to tackle the nuts that are part of the exhaust flange for the manifold that are up there with the bolt broken off in it. So I'm going to grab some tools and get to it. All right, we're just cleaning up and preparing the surface for the new gasket. We want to make sure that all the remnants of the old gasket are gone so that everything fits in there nice. And that's good there. I'm going to go grab my air hammer now with a long chisel bit, and I'm going to knock those threads off. There you go. You can see I just knocked that out of there. And we got a couple little sharp pieces that are still welded on there, pretty much part of the weld. And I got to do the other side now. If you take a look right through there, you can actually see how there's a big section of the threads missing. And this one's a little more tricky to get to. You do have a little bit of room though. Think of which way I gotta go for this again. If I can go through this way. Okay, that's pretty much off of there. I'm just gonna get some pliers and pull it off, but the welds have fractured, so that's good. We'll get that off, and that'll give us room for the nuts to go on now. Okay, so now I'm just trying to get the shield off. This is what's covering pretty much all of our holes, and it's welded on there, so it'll be very difficult for you if you're trying to do this at home, even if you have a welder, to take this shield off the way I'm taking it off. I'm just lucky enough that it's rotten enough where I was able to cut around some of the welds and actually just use a pry bar to break the other ones. And there's really minimal force to get this thing off. So it's almost off here, but you pretty much will want to take the exhaust pipe out if you're going to be welding this. Hopefully your cat doesn't have holes in it. But if you do the gasket and spring bolts and it's still leaking, there's a good chance that it's probably leaking underneath of that shield. So. All right, so we got the cat welded up, and it was really thin in a bunch of spots. You can see how haggard it looks. I had to basically spot weld around the thin holes and then sort of fill it in and be careful. And now I'm going to put some muffler cement on it, which will sort of protect the weld, strengthen it, most importantly, not make it look so haggard, which nobody's really going to look at it anyways. But it also fills in any possible little pinholes and stuff like that. I want it to be perfectly sealed. So I'm gonna do that right now, and then we're ready to go back and start putting this thing together, which if you're watching to this point and you're doing this at home, obviously you're probably not gonna weld this, but say yours has holes in it and you wanna fix it, you can go to autoshack.com, and we may put a link in the description, and you can actually buy this whole pipe. I believe they're about $350 to $400 Canadian. Sometimes they go on sale for like $200, and that's the entire mid pipe. And what else did it come with? Oh yeah, it was like split. It was a split mid pipe, so it slides together, which is nice. But yeah, it comes with the Cat, all the gaskets, the springs, and the bolts. So. All right, we got the donut gasket, and you're just gonna slip it on there after you make sure that that pipe's all clean. There's no extra gasket material, whatever, sitting on there. We want it to be nice and seated. Obviously, the round side facing out. Because of this flange that's on the Cat, it's concave, so the donut sits into that shape. Now, that silicone that I was talking about, this is where this comes into play. If you come take a look at the inside of that flange up there on the Cat side, you can see that there's a bunch of gasket material that gets stuck on there, and it almost like etches into the metal over time from engine vibrations on that gasket. So you have a brand new smooth gasket, and then you've got that flange that's all distorted and it's not smooth. And a lot of times, I would say like 8 times out of 10, if you just put it on like that, it's gonna leak. So you can buy high temp silicone, has to be high temperature. And I'm gonna put a little bit around the inside of that flange on the catalytic converter side, and then we'll go ahead and put our bolts and stuff together. And that has always sealed up for me. I've never had any issues. So as long, it just has to be high temp. Sort of just doing this blind. In metal pieces. Okay, just giving it a little blow there with the compressed air just to make sure there wasn't any metal filings, and sometimes like welding spatter and stuff can like fall in there, just in the case of me fixing it. Also, if you're putting a new pipe, or not a new pipe, but you're putting this pipe back on, you should just make sure that there's nothing in front of the Cat. So. All right, so I just got to get all of these hangers back on. And then once we get those on, we're ready to put our bolts in. I'm gonna go over this down. You can see I got my nut started on there. And I just want to get it on there most of the way, just so I can get this other side started. So the passenger side is going to be easy, so you can get your hands in there. Now the bolt that needs to go on the driver's side, if your flange still has threads and they're good, that's no problem. You can just put it on an extension with a ratchet or an impact gun. I would start it by hand, but you can just get in there and do it. If you have to do what I'm doing and use a nut, it's gonna be a little trickier because you're gonna have to use one hand to go in there and hold the bolt in there, and then use the other hand to bring the nut around the backside. And it can be a little bit tricky, but not impossible. Okay. Where did I put that wrench? All right, now that we've got our hardware in, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it down now. All right, we are installed. I'm ready to put my sensor back through the floor again. So this thing can go back through. Just stuff it in there. Okay, so it's something like that. And don't forget any tools. Just take a look at it, make sure everything looks good. I don't see any issues. All of our hangers are now installed, so that's good. And I'm just gonna get rid of this ratchet strap. We're gonna lower this thing down, plug in the oxygen sensor, we'll start it up and see how it sounds. All right, we've got it plugged in. Just carefully tuck the carpet back underneath of there. There's a slot for this tab to go through, so that needs to get in there first. And once that's installed, we can just line this thing up, press in. Quick, easy installation. Now we're ready to start it up and see what it sounds like. Perfect. Sounds like a matrix should sound like. So that's pretty much it. I hope that yours isn't all rotten and stuff like that, but if it is, hopefully you get some good tips from this video. Thanks for watching. Got any comments or questions rather, throw them down in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.